So hi, I'm Tim Brown from Brown Brothers Ford. This is the Matech GT3 Ford GT. They were cars that were raced from 2006 right through to 2011 in the FIA GT3 series. This is chassis number 1. It was built in 2008. It's a two-time champion in the Brazilian FIA GT3 series. Basically after that, it sat in a warehouse in Florida where I purchased it, and then we went about a kind of a year or so restoration race prep on the car, and this is the condition you see it in today. Just some little differences between a road car GT and the GT3 version. All the body panels are carbon fiber, other than the roof structure is still aluminum. The front of the car is wider. There's obviously some aero changes. It's got a larger front splitter. The road car does not have a big rear wing, as you can see. And if you come around to the back, you can see that it's got a quite a bit larger rear diffuser. I mean, this is all to generate more downforce. This car weighs 2,500 pounds. The road car is about 3,250. But the biggest change is the road car has a 5.4 4-valve V8. It's dry sumped 4-valve 4-cam. This has a 5-liter non-supercharged engine, and they were restricted in the series to about 550 horsepower. It also has a sequential Hewland NLT gearbox in it, transaxle, and obviously bigger tires and wheels, different suspension geometry, but they were limited by the FIA as to how much they could change on the car. One of the other changes is 18-inch wheels. Most of the series ran Pirellis, some of them ran Michelin's. The cars ran in Germany on Dunlops, but it's an 18 by 12 inch wide front wheel and an 18 by 13 in the rear. Brake-wise, different package. This car runs a AP Racing 6-piston caliper with a 14.5-inch rotor, and in the rear it's a 4-piston AP with a slightly smaller rotor. They're a 2-piece, so they're floating. Shock-wise, they were limited at the time by the series to just a 2-way adjustable. So they have a coilover, which we'll show you later. It's a Bilstein, and then the suspension uprights, control arms, made just for this car. They're a race car piece. So no production pieces there. Motor-wise, as I said before, it's not supercharged, it's naturally aspirated. It's a 5-liter built by Roush Yates in the US, and they were restricted to around 550 horsepower. So it would change depending on how well the car was doing. They could change the restrictor size to reduce power or give them more power back. And they also did the same thing with weight. This car does not have it anymore, but they did have a ballast box in the passenger side seat area where they could add or subtract weight depending on how well the car was doing in the series. Yeah, so this is kind of unique. You can see the little indentation. That's where the factory mirrors would mount. So when they made the molds for these doors are carbon, the factory doors are aluminum, they left them in. I think initially they were going to run the factory mirrors, but they ended up going to these ones that mount higher up on the around the window frame. And if you look on these, you can see there's a hole right here. This tube is also hollow, so this takes air into the cabin. It's supposed to provide a bit of ventilation inside the vehicle. So one thing that's different on this car, and they did it on some of the later ones, is they went to aero catches. Before they just had cam locks there. We changed when we put the car together how the hood mounts. We just put a bar and epoxied in these pins so it just slides in nice and easy. So this, you can see it's a nice lightweight carbon piece. On the street car, they're actually made out of a composite also. So if you look under the front bonnet, I guess, you can see this is the fuel cell. It actually runs all the way up the center of the vehicle. So the cell itself is a bit of a box up front and then a long tube that runs all the way down the center tunnel. Some of the cars, this one doesn't have it, but if they're running in endurance races, they would have a quick fill setup and a hole cut in the hood. The cars that ran in the FIA GT3 series didn't need it because all the races were under an hour long, and this car will run an hour. You can see also too, this is the front air jack. It's a Crontec air jack. So there's one at the front, and then there's 2 in the outer corners in the rear when you want to lift the car up for a tire change or pit stop. If you look in around this other side, you can see all the ductwork from the radiator for cooling. The other coolers are all fed off the side scoop, so this is the only one that's on the front is just for the engine cooling. The interesting part about this car, the power steering system and the rack and pinion for the steering is from a GT3 Porsche Cup car. So the Matech, I think, just thought it would work well. It saved them some money. So it's a electric over hydraulic power steering system that comes right out of a like 997 Cup car. And the other thing that's, this car does not have headlights. They did all come with headlights. The races I've been running in, we're never going to need them, so we didn't put them back in just to save a bit of weight. And then the other thing that's a little different is the reservoirs for the front and rear brake masters and the clutch slave master, that we switched them from the AP round style one to this Tilton setup. It's just a little neater. Taking off the rear clamshell so you get access to the engine and all the other mechanicals. We did change a few things with this. We went to hood pins here. They had cam locks, and then they also had cam locks at the back and right on the side, which cracked. So when we changed it, we put in, again, a little bit of a framework and pins that slide in at the back, so it only owns a couple of fasteners, and then we'll show you when to pull it off, there's a locating pin there. So basically the process is just pull these off. We usually just put them around the antenna there, and then you just pop the front up a little bit, and then when you get to about here, you just slide the pins out, go all the way forward, and then up, and we'll go over the back. It used to be a tab here and a cam lock. We changed it, just put a locating pin and then bonded in a little receptacle on the hatch. And then back here, we just put these guys in where it slides in and pins it at the back. So it's a lot simpler. It works a little nicer and you don't have all the pins kind of sticking out. So some of the stuff, we ended up getting new front fenders, a couple of side pieces, the nose piece, and then all the inner wheel well pieces because they get beat up quite badly. As you can see, this one's worn right through. And they're a carbon Kevlar kind of weave. If you take care of them, they're pretty good, but if you come and look, you can see those are all new. We did the front ones also. It's a dry sump motor, as I said before. Here's the oil tank for the dry sump. It's a daily dry sump system, so the pump, which you can't see, is buried down the other corner of the motor there, and it uses a billet pan that's machined, so there's no lines, external lines to the pump for the scavenge. It's a 3-stage or 4-stage, I should say. Instead, the pump mounts right on the side of the billet pan, just with O-rings, so it's a lot easier than conventional older style dry sump system. The transaxle you can see here, it's a Hewland NLT. They don't make it anymore, but all the gears are still available. Spring rates were set for the homologation, and so were gear ratios, so you couldn't really change any of that. Once the car was homologated, you had to run it. I think you could do an alternate set of springs, but beyond that, it was all frozen, and we'll kind of show you in the book what you do to homologate a car to approve it for FIA GT3. The motor, as you can see, as I said before, it's a Roush Yates built engine. It's a single throttle body with a kind of a plenum style intake with a carbon top on it. That was all done by Roush Yates. Motor revs to about 7,600 RPM. Makes good torque, good power right to there. You can rev it a bit higher, but I think power peaks around 74. Oh, one thing too, this car has exhaust on it. That's not the way they came. Some of the series they had to run almost nothing. Other ones they had a big box style muffler in the back, like a canister one. One of the other things they do back here is, so this bar and this one are obviously, they're the factory ones. And if you look at the factory car over there, it has quite a large piece of bolts across here. They got rid of it and put this X brace. And then obviously the cage comes from the inside the car and kind of triangulates with the top of the suspension pickup for the coilover. Okay, we'll take a look inside. So as I said before, the doors are exactly the same as the factory ones, which are aluminum, but these are carbon. And you can look kind of a neat little detail, kind of hard to see, but the Matech logo is on the inside of this carbon door pocket. I don't know if you're going to be able to see it, but they're really light doors, and they probably weigh, I don't know, 6 or 8 pounds before you put the Lexan in. The one thing that is different on the exterior, the Matech cars all have a slider vent little window here, which I switched to these helicopter style pop-ups just because I find they direct the air into the cockpit a little better. It keeps you a bit cooler. Some of the differences, obviously, there's no interior, single seat. Some of the electronics are all on the floor over there. Wheels, quick disconnect, so it's easier to get in and out. Put the back on, just locks back in. buttons on the wheel. You can disable any alarms if you get an alarm for low oil pressure stuff. Pit speed limiter here, which you can set to any speed you want. So when you push that, it'll hold the engine at a certain pit speed. This is to scroll through the information on the dash itself. So you see the bottom half of the dash, our engine temperature, oil pressure, and you move through to oil temp, and up on the top is fuel pressure. And there's also a couple different modes there. This is just to flash the high beams or the lights, which this car doesn't have, but they came with it, and a push to talk for the radio. One thing this car does have, it has anti-lock brakes. So the ABS system is a Bosch Motorsport one. And as you can see, it's adjustable. So you can turn from 1 to 12 for different levels of how much ABS intervention you want. And you can also turn it off completely, which the way this is set up, you wouldn't want to drive it that way. And it has a fault light if the ABS is malfunctioning. Red light will come on the dash. All right, so this car, as we talked about before, has 3 air jacks, 1 in the front, 2 in the rear. They're from a company called Crontec. So this is just the little air wand that you use. It takes about 450 PSI of nitrogen to lift it up. So I'll put the wand in. Here's the little receptacle for it, and then I'll turn on the nitrogen, and you'll see it. So there it is up in the air. So as you can see, the upper control arm and lower control arm, they're all just fabbed pieces that were done by Matech. But the pickup points are the factory pieces, which was part of the whole homologation process. And you can see there's some brake cooling in the back. It draws the air in through the side scoop. There's also, which is unique to this, it actually has a fuel cooler in it, and the other side is a oil cooler. So we're just, and I do a comparison. So the race car does not have this fairly robust piece that the actual factory transaxle mounts up into here, and then they put a triangulated X brace in with a mount on it for the Hewland transaxle. So that's a little different. This is all the same. These pieces, we don't run this bumper piece. It's a carbon bumper with just a support behind it. Other than that, these are, I showed you before, are still on the race car, but they've got additional ones. There's a cross brace one, and the cage tubes come down and tie into this area. So just a little more rigidity in the structure. Other than that, everything else is the same. If you go around to the front, they don't have any of this in. They don't have this piece. This is gone because the fuel cell comes forward, and then they run an X brace also that runs on a different angle and actually incorporates the mount for the air jack in the front. So one of the things that the race cars initially, when they built them off the street cars, they used the factory taillights, which is a pretty nice looking taillight. But when they started building them off the frame from Ford Racing, they went to buy the taillights, and they're about $3,500 a piece. So all the later cars just have a piece of Lexan with a decal and some bulbs in behind. I didn't really like the look of it, and so being a Ford dealer, I bought some taillights. They're a bit cheaper than that. We redid the mold on the back to build a bucket to hold the factory lights. So all the factory marker lights, and these are factory ones, they're actually from a Range Rover 08 or 09 Freelander. I mentioned homologations, which is basically the process that you get the car made legal to run in the GT3 class worldwide through the FIA. So once it's done, you get a booklet like this, and as you can see, it's got everything from bodywork. You need pictures of all the bodywork dimensions. You can go through all the stuff on the frame, engine mounts, engine block. Everything has to match. You can't deviate from this, or the car wouldn't be legal for the GT3 class. Clutch, connecting rods, the weights, port sizes on the cylinder ends. It's all here. And I mean, it gets down to the exhaust system. As I said before, spring rates, and there is an optional spring rate, which heat exchanger, oil cooler you use, water pump, all the stuff. I mean, suspension pieces, here they all are, all the measurements. Basically all the geometry, even where everything mounts on the frame, and they use a laser measuring tool to determine if you've altered it or not. There's all the different uprights, upper and lower control arms. There's the spring rates front, and then here's the shocks. They even include a shock valving chart for the valving that you have to stick to, bump stops, everything, sway bars, steering rack, master cylinder size, pedal box, down to the brakes. We talked about brakes. It's an AP front caliper, a 6-piston. It's a 4-piston rear, and then you can see they show pictures of them on the upright. Shows you what they're from Performance Friction. The rotors, so 378 millimeter front and a 355 rear. Down to thickness, they're 32 millimeter. Pictures of them with the hats. It gives you the wheel specifications, even down to wheel weight. So this is kind of the Bible for the car. Obviously, they can apply for changes with the FIA. So in the later years, some of the cars got some aero upgrades to make them more competitive. They let them run a different wing, different front splitter. But this car is the initial spec car because it wasn't raced later on. I'd like to say thanks for watching. Hopefully you learned something about the Matech GT3 Ford GT. We'll be doing some other videos on some of the other cars you see here in the future. So keep checking back and hopefully have some more for you guys to look at. Thanks.